Today I'm sharing a very easy project that looks amazing when done. The first step is to attach the stencil to the wall with painter's tape. Take a good amount of spackle on the putty knife and drag it across the stencil. Make sure to fill in any spots you may have missed. Carry on to your other stencils. Remove the stencils, and if you have gotten spackle outside of the stencil, wipe it off the wall. Follow the instructions on your spackle for drying time. Ours was 24 hours. When it is dry, paint over the entire wall from the top to the bottom with your original paint color. Let dry. Now enjoy. I did the best I could to show you how great it looks, but for some reason the camera does not pick it up as well as the human eye. I can guarantee you though that it looks lovely and it is very visible. It isn't too busy, but it took what was once an unremarkable wall and turned it into something special.
So I ran down to the hardware store and grabbed several pieces of brick molding. My first step in creating my floor-to-ceiling headboard wall was to figure out my spacing. I used the existing small headboard as a guide, and I placed 2 of the brick molds on either side. I secured these in place using just painter's tape for now so that I could step back and make sure that they looked the way I wanted them to. Once that was done, I moved things out of the way, and then I secured the brick molding using a nail gun. Now that those outer edges were in place, the next step was to figure out the center pieces. I took a good amount of time making sure that everything was evenly spaced. Once I was happy with the way that looked, I secured that in place using the nail gun as well. I used caulking and ran it down the side of the brick molding. This way, everything would look nice and finished and uniform. Once that was dry, I was able to add my paint. I applied several coats of white paint so that everything would look like it was one continuous piece. Once the several coats of paint were dry, I went ahead and moved the furniture back into the room, made the beds, and got to work on decorating. I thought it looked great and brightened up the room, gave it a little bit of visual interest, defined the theme of the area, and it really didn't cost very much at all. I wanted to create a dimensional wood wall with various shades of color to fill this space. Rather than spending time cutting pieces of wood, I decided to use wood shims for my project. I used both long and short shims because I didn't want my textured wall to be uniform. I stained the wood shims using a water-based stain. This has less odor than an oil-based one. The color I chose was antique walnut. I got to work staining my wood pieces using a paper towel at first, but then switched to a rag because it ultimately worked much better for me and didn't fall apart the way the paper did. I stained the shims in varying degrees, some with just 1 light coat and others with up to 7 coats to make them nice and dark. I started attaching the stained wood shims to the wall using construction adhesive. I found it best to first place the long pieces in a random pattern on the wall, and then overlay these with the shorter pieces. This way, I was building up the wall dimensionally as well as varying the color throughout. I worked my way up the wall, stopping a few times along the way to stain more shims. I really used a lot more shims than I originally expected. It was easy and fun putting these on the wall. It really felt like creating my own art masterpiece. There were some gaps between the pieces, and so I had to cover these with smaller pieces at the end. When it came to the light switch on the wall, I just worked right up to the switch. And then the wall was done. I love the way it looks. I'm still deciding if I want to just leave the wall the way it is or if I want to put a piece of framed artwork over it. So for 2 days worth of work and about $120 in materials, I was able to transform this wall into something that I really love. So I headed down to the hardware store and picked up some 1x2s. When I got back to the condo, I measured my wall and cut the wood down to size. I stained the wood. It was really easy wearing gloves and using the cloth, and I loved the dark color. I let the pieces dry and then I was ready to start. I made sure the first piece was plumb. I recently learned that vertical measurements are plumb, whereas horizontal ones are level. I made sure the first piece was plumb, and then I used a nail gun to attach it to the wall. Once I had the first piece in place, I used another piece as a spacer and then secured the next one. Using the 1x2 as a spacer made the job quick and easy. I secured all of my vertical boards in place. I ended up using 13 pieces for the wall, but you can obviously add as many or as few as you need for your space. Many slat walls end at the top of the wall, but I'd seen a few that extended onto the ceiling and I liked the way they looked. I secured the pieces on the ceiling. I abutted them against each other, but these could certainly be miter cut for a more seamless finish if desired. I also cut the slat boards so as not to obstruct the outlet. I left some room to make sure that the wood wouldn't interfere with anything bulky that needed to be plugged in. The slat wall was looking good, but I wanted to make it more unique by adding light. I used LED strip lights with a remote control. These were really easy to use because they have an adhesive backing and could be stuck directly to the wood. I removed the backing and stuck them along the wall and also up onto the ceiling pieces. I chose to run the lights in alternate lines, but of course any pattern can be used depending on personal preference. Turning it on for the first time was exciting. The lights changed color with the remote, and my favorite was the cool blue light. I added a few more things to the room, including shelves in a matching color, curtains, and a bed. I love the uniqueness that the slats and lights gave to the room. I hope this inspired you to create a cool slat wall accent of your own. If you have damaged walls like I did, this budget-friendly repair requires no drywall skills whatsoever. I started with this bathroom that had mosaic tiles stuck on the wall as decorative elements. It just wasn't the style that I was looking for, but removing them and removing the old towel bar caused damage to the wall. In order to cover it up and also to give the bathroom the look that I was looking for, I ran down to the hardware store and picked up 2 sheets of beadboard. Then I measured and cut the beadboard down to size using a table saw. I attached it to the wall with my nail gun. It took no time at all. Since the beadboard is 4 feet wide, but my wall is longer than this, I needed to cut my second sheet and line it up next to the first. The next step was to add a wood border to the top. I used very inexpensive common board, and the size I used was 1x8. I measured the length I needed and cut it to size. Then I painted the top of it before attaching it to the wall. This way I didn't have to paint the top when it was in place, because I'd surely end up painting the wall accidentally if I tried that. When I attached the board, there was a small gap between the wood and beadboard, but it was easy to fill this gap using paintable caulking. Once that dried, I got started with painting. Here, you could really change the look of your room by painting the entire thing a dark gray or even black to make it look modern, or a bright blue for a nautical or coastal look, but I stuck with white for this particular bathroom. In order to finish off my beadboard accent, I added hooks. After that, I added my towels and a new shower curtain, and my quick little bathroom upgrade was complete. I really like the way it looks, and I'm glad I was able to remove the old mosaic tile on the wall without having to patch drywall or call someone in to make repairs. I hope this inspired you to update a wall in your room with a style that you love. I wanted to update this condo bedroom on a budget and in one day. I love the way picture frame moldings look, and I started by taping off a general idea of where molding would go and what the picture frame boxes would look like. I wanted mitered corners, so I set the saw at a 45-degree angle and started cutting my pieces. When I cut the corresponding pieces, like the 2 sides or the top and bottom, I stacked the pieces together and cut them together so that their sizes were truly identical. I had marked the wall with a pencil where my pieces needed to go, so the next step was to apply my adhesive on the back side of the molding and attach it to the wall, using a level to make sure that everything was straight. I would recommend not adding too much adhesive so that it doesn't get all over the wall when you end up pushing the molding onto the wall itself. I did have a spot where I had to go around an outlet. In this area, I just made straight cuts at the top and bottom of the outlet area. I also made sure that my mitered corners were as tight as possible, and they really did go together very well, and any small gap was filled with some caulking in the next step. I started caulking the places where the molding met the wall to cover up that small gap and give it a professional finish. I caulked it on the inside and outside of all of the picture frame sections. Sometimes the caulking goes on perfectly smoothly, but sometimes it just doesn't. Either way, all I did was run my finger along the area to smooth down the caulking. Once I had the molding in place, it was ready for paint. We ended up with this dark gray with a bit of purple undertone. I used a Wagner paint sprayer that I had received from another project, and I was able to get this wall painted incredibly fast as a result. In this room, I also replaced the flooring and added nice big baseboards. And here's the result. I love the way the furniture sits in relation to the picture frame molding, and I love the way the accent wall makes the room look. Most of all, I love that I did it myself and that it cost under $50. I hope that this inspired you to create an accent wall of your own. Thanks for watching Home Talk, and see you next time.